eternal monarchy. Monarch means one ruler. That means I rule me. I own me and rule the kingdom of myself. Period. No one else owns me. I do recognize my sovereignty. I do employ unity or non-duality consciousness. As I think, so I feel, so I act. So that's what it's all about, self-ownership, and that means you have become a monarch, the one ruler of you. Self-control, self-governance. Okay, confusion in slide 46 depicted there. Okay, that state is a state of being completely broken up internally. You're in a state where you don't know what's going on inside of you. You haven't looked at your actual self. You don't know about your own consciousness and your own psyche. And so you're in a state of internal opposition consciousness. That means that your behaviors are in contradiction to your thoughts and your emotions. You can think and feel one way and act a completely different way. Ultimately, you're in opposition with your own self. And this leads to opposition in the external world. That's the correspondence principle. As there are more people in internal opposition, there are more people in external opposition. Okay? The internal is reflected on the external. The microcosm is reflected in the macrocosm. Okay? When you're in that state, you're wide open to the next slide, slide 48, which shows an image of a puppet master holding a puppet on strings. And that's the state of manipulation, or mind control, as we've been talking about for so many weeks here. Okay? So when you're in the state of internal confusion or internal anarchy, okay, not ruling your own house, not ruling your own kingdom, then you're in opposition consciousness within, and you could be manipulated from without. Very simply. The next slide, 49, shows the external expressions of natural law. This is when we employ either the positive expression of love or the negative expression of fear, what we get outwardly in society. Okay? And if we employ the positive expression of love, we will get external freedom. True freedom is the positive external expression of natural law. And this is what I have labeled here external anarchy. External anarchy, meaning no one is ruling anyone else externally. There are no masters and no slaves. Everyone is created equal and expresses their consciousness by living equally amongst each other in harmony. Okay? Nobody thinks they own anybody else as they do today. People thinking they're God and own other people. That's ultimately what the governments and police forces and military of the world are. They're people who think they're God, as we've said many times on this show. People who think that they control the actions of other people who aren't really breaking any natural laws or violating the natural law rights of others. In fact, that's what the governments, police forces, and militaries of this world do every single day, is violate natural laws we'll get to. Okay? So true freedom, as is shown in slide 50, is external anarchy, the falling away of the chains that have for so long bound this planet. True freedom, no external rulership of others. And in slide 51, we see the opposite condition. That's when fear has gone haywire. People remain in a state of ignorance and refuse truth. They're in a state of internal confusion, which leads, or internal anarchy, which leads to a state of wanting to exercise external control over anyone and everyone until it becomes completely coalesced into fewer and fewer hands, concentrated power into fewer and fewer hands, okay, centralization of power, and that becomes an external monarchy, okay, or one world government, which is what we're spiraling toward in the modern world. And that's external monarchy, meaning there is one force that is ruling everybody. Okay? Moving to the next slide, which I believe is slide 52. The chart is completed here, and we see the generative expression, or the manifestation of natural law in our world. There is a positive expression when we have moved through all of these other states. By using the generative polarity of love, we get a generative expression or manifestation called order, or what we recognize and know to be everything that we experience as good in the world. Things are ordered, they are peaceful, they are in harmony, they are good. Okay? If, on the other hand, and you can see images of this in slide 53 and 54, if, on the other hand, we have used the polarity of fear, dwelt in ignorance, confusion, and then brought it through to attempt external control of others, we result in mostly what the world is like today, a state of chaos. And this is what we're ultimately trying to avoid by helping people to understand how these natural law principles do indeed work. In slide 55, we see a very simple idea. When you start using the generative polarity in the positive sense, you cannot create any of the negative expressions. Okay? The positive generative force, which is love, can only create the positive expressions in this chart. They do not cross over. So if you employ love, you cannot create ignorance. If you employ knowledge, you cannot create confusion. If you employ sovereignty, you cannot result with control, chaos, or evil, etc., etc., etc. They move in one direction. They are mutually exclusive forces. When you employ one, you get one set of results. When you employ another, you get a completely different set of results. This is very important, okay? They are indeed polarized principles. The principle of polarity applies here, okay? Moving to the next slide, slide 56. These are the four polarities that natural law is essentially recognized through. And we'll get to those when we come back. I call this section, the next four sections, I call Know the Difference. We'll highlight some of the differences to help us understand natural law. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back here on What on Earth is Happening. I'm going to jump right back into the presentation on natural law because we don't have too much time. So here we go. Know the Difference is the next section, and we're on slide 56 here, and moving right to slide 57, we're going to attempt to understand the difference between right and wrong, and that sounds overly simplified, and it's the year 2010, and I feel like I need to be explaining people the difference between right and wrong, really. But unfortunately, that's the world that we live in, it seems, and people don't really make much of a distinction between this because of the amount of moral relativism that exists in our culture. So when we use the word right, we often mean correct, meaning 2 plus 2 equals 4. You're right, correct. So it is something that is based in truth. We use the word right to represent. We also use it to represent something that is moral. That action was right to take. It is based in natural law. Okay? It is right. It has not harmed anybody. Okay? So again, actions based in it do not result in harm to other sovereign beings, to other living beings, period. Okay? Again, we're defining right here in the negative sense. That which does not result in harm is right. You are right to take that action. Very simply. Okay? Does it result in harm to another being? Or does it result in usurping their natural law rights? Well, if it does, it's not right. If it does not result in any harm, that is within your right to take that action. Wrong, on the other hand, we use the word wrong to represent something that is incorrect. As I said the other night, you could say 2 plus 2 equals 5, and that's the wrong answer. Quite simply, it's not based in truth. That's not the truth. But when we use the word wrong, we also mean immoral, meaning something that somebody did not have the right to take an action. Okay? That was wrong to do that to your brother or your sister. Okay? Actions based in this result in harm to other living beings. Quite simply. It can't get any simpler than this, folks. The concepts of incorrect and immoral are equivalent, and the concepts of correct and moral are equivalent. If something is based in truth, it is based in principles, it is based in natural law, it will not result in harm. If something is not based in truth, it will not be based in natural law, it will result in harm. It can't get any simpler than that, and I cannot get anyone to accept that. There is no way I can make you accept that. All I can tell you is that is the truth, and that is how natural law works. This is one of the fundamental principles and polarities to understand when it comes to natural law. I can only put it out there. You can accept or reject it. Slide 58, conscience, is what the understanding of natural law is ultimately attempting to create within us, to develop true conscience. Conscience is a word that comes from Latin. It means to know together. Con means together in Latin. A prefix in Latin means together. And scio, sciere, means to know or to understand. Conscience is to know together, to come to a place of knowledge together. Common sense is what conscience ultimately is. And sadly, we have lost our common sense in the modern world. And most people do not know the difference between right or wrong anymore. As sad as that sounds, that's the case. Okay? So the next slide is called Know Your Rights. And I list 3 basic principles here that are easy to keep in mind. It is best to understand your rights in the apophatic sense. Apophatic, A-P-O-P-H-A-T-I-C. What this means is in the negative, being defined in the negative. Okay, and this sounds bad, but it's actually quite good, and it's a good way to understand what your rights are and what they are not. We need to come to know which actions are not our rights because they cause harm. And we have way too many rights to list them all. There's so many actions that you can do and take that don't result in harm to other living beings that you couldn't possibly list them all. But you can define what you do not have the right to take. Okay? Everything else that remains are your rights. If it causes harm, they're not your rights. So define your rights in the apophatic sense as opposed to the affirmative sense. Okay? Natural law holds true regardless of the human population. I hear that one of the biggest arguments people come up with is, well, if there were only a few people in the world, and it was a real small society or town or village, well, you could act like that, but the Earth has 7 billion people on it. Ladies and gentlemen, natural law does not care how many people are living on a planet. It exists. It is immutable. It is unchanging. Your rights are not going to change whether there's 1 person or 2 people or whether there's 20 billion people on a planet. It doesn't make a difference. The human population is irrelevant when it comes to natural law rights. Your rights hold true, hold to be the same, and what your rights are not hold to be the same. In other words, right and wrong is the same regardless of how many people there are. Okay? When in doubt as to whether an action is in harmony with natural law, simply visualize the scenario of a world where there are only 2 people. And this is an exercise I've talked about on this show in the past. Okay? If something is wrong to take an action where there are only 2 people, it's wrong to do it in a world where there are 7 billion people. All right? So if there's 2 people living in the world, I can't go over and say, I'm stealing the food that you produced, and I'm going to come and take this much of it after you've produced it. You can't do that. Okay? That's wrong to do in a situation where there's only 2 people. It would be wrong to do in a situation where there's 10